Welcome everybody to the Little Athletics New South Wales Sunday Coaching School. My name is Darren Wenzer. I'm the Head of Coach and Volunteer Development at Little Athletics New South Wales. It is wonderful to have Dr. Di Huxley as our guest today. Now, Di is a leading expert in coaching, teaching and health and fitness. Now, among a long list of qualifications that she has a doctorate in elite athlete development, a Masters of Coach Education, and she is a Level 5 middle and long distance coach with Athletics Australia. Now, she has lectured in coaching and fitness and sports science at a number of tertiary institutions, has been manager of multiple Australian teams, including Paralympic, Olympic and Commonwealth Games, and World Track and Field Championships, and a high performance coach at the Australian, New South Wales and Tasmanian Institutes of Sport. Now, she is also an internationally regarded researcher in the development of athletes from grassroots to elite level. Now, welcome, Di. It is lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Darren. It's very nice to be here. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
You've done so much. There was so much in what we just mentioned there. But let's start by going right back. I would love to hear a little bit about, firstly, where you grew up and what was your early involvement in sport?
Okay, well, I grew up in Victoria until I was about 11 at Torquay. Grew up on the beach, so I had a very active childhood, and then high school in Geelong, and then university in Melbourne. So we just had a very, very active childhood, playing, really, lots of deliberate play. Didn't get into any formal or structured sport until late in primary school with some netball, and didn't get involved in athletics until I went to high school. And the reason I got involved in competitive athletics was because my sister was a year ahead of me at school, and at the school carnival, she was approached by a local coach who noticed a bit of talent and came up to her and my parents and said, "Oh, would Sue like to be coached by me?" And my mum said, "Oh yes, but only if you take her younger sister along. We need to get her out." So I went along, and we used to train twice a week, and I was always, behind everyone else in the training group. And then suddenly at about 13 or 14, I just sort of was beating everybody, and suddenly, became very passionate about the sport and very keen to, and very competitive. And basically it's been, a huge passion and a major part of my life for over 40 years now. So yeah, that was my sort of introduction to track and field.
And what were your events, Di? What were your events?
Well, back in the old days, girls could really only do sprinting. So I was sprinting, and then I moved up to 400 when I was about 14, I suppose. And then middle distance, more 400. And I remember my coach, he didn't want me to do any longer running. And I went in the Victorian Cross Country Championships when I was about 15, 16, and I actually won. And I came back and I said, "Well, I need to do some longer running because I'm going to the national cross country." And he said, "Oh, no, we only train on the track. You're a sprinter." So I used to sneak off and do some runs with my brother, and I ended up winning the national cross country. So I guess I was a combination of middle distance, not really a long distance runner, although I did run a couple of marathons, but not just to participate in them more than anything else. So no, I'd say middle distance was my key event.
Okay. And when did coaching start for you, Di? When did you first get involved in coaching?
Well, I was a teacher, a high school teacher, and if anyone else is a teacher out there, they'll know that that whatever sport you played at school, you were suddenly the coach at school. So I arrived at in Hobart teaching at a girls' school down there, and the coaching, the person who had been coaching the athletics and cross country was moving to Brisbane, and she said, "Well, here you are, this is your job, you're going to be doing this." I was a science teacher, and I said, "Well, well, just because I'm a good athlete doesn't mean I'm a good coach. So I thought, well, I better go and do a course. So off I went and enrolled in a level 1 course, and that was like I guess a light bulb moment. And I was lucky enough to be involved in the course. It was led by John Quinn, who was down in Tasmania as the head coach of the Tasmanian Institute of Sport. And we've had, well, that we started to, we really connected, and I actually continued coaching in the girls' school. And eventually he said to me, oh, I've been watching what you're up to with all your athletes, and I'd be really keen if you would become involved as a scholarship coach, or assist me as a coach. He had a big squad, and that's sort of how I got on the pathway to as a professional coach. So eventually I took over from John as a head coach when he moved on to football to Essendon. So from there I just continued with those roles in came to New South Wales, and had a bit of a stint at the AIS. Yeah. So that's sort of been my pathway.
And along that coaching pathway, Di, do you have any favourite moments, any coaching highlights?
Oh, there's so many. It's interesting that I've coached really from, as you said, grassroots right up to international level, and I think for me the biggest, look, I had an athlete win a bronze medal at the Paralympics in the marathon, which, athletes winning state titles or national titles and things like that is really rewarding, and terrific moments for the athletes especially. But I think for me, it's having an impact on a young person or any person that you're working with, their life, not just in the sport but outside. And I think that's been the most rewarding thing for me as a coach, is that I know that I've really been instrumental in helping them achieve their athletic goals, but also outside sport, guiding them, their careers, being a friend outside the sport. And one of the most rewarding things is that I've got quite a few athletes who are retired now, and I'm still keeping close contact with. And I had a lovely message from one recently who said, we'd had breakfast, and she sent me a message after. She said that she really appreciated having me in her life, even more so now that she wasn't an athlete. And I think when you've had that impact on people, they're the moments that you really cherish and mean a lot to you in terms of a coach, that you've been so sort of important in a person's life.
And in this, all the coaching that you've done and the research that you've done, and we will speak a little bit about that. What are some things that you really believe when it comes to coaching? Are there any sort of core philosophies that you live by when it comes to coaching?
Yeah, I think, as I alluded to, it's coaching the person, not the athlete. So it's a person first, and understanding each individual and coaching them in that way, so that they understand that you recognize them for who they are, that you care. I think genuinely caring about the people. So those things are important, but being really well educated and being really knowing your stuff, and ongoing learning. And that's something that I think has really helped me all the way through my career, because I'm always looking to learn more and more. And as just why I went into my research, because I'd had a huge amount of practical experience and anecdotal evidence, and I really wanted to back that up with the research. And because there'd been no research in the area that I work with on Australian track and field athletes, I think I wanted to confirm or learn more about what I'd known from the practical. But the other thing too, I think that's important as a philosophy for me, is that I think I lead by example, and I try to show the athletes that I'm committed, 100% committed, and I think and that I respect them, and that it's a mutual thing. We're in it together. It's not me. I'm not the person in control. It's as a team thing. We work together. Obviously, you know, when you've got younger athletes, it's different. It changes. You change as they mature, or the age group that you're working with. But and also creating an environment that wants particularly young athletes to come back, a supportive, nurturing environment where they feel welcome and where they feel recognised for who they are, not just athletically, but knowing something about them outside. So I think they're some of the key things that are important to me or drive me as a coach.
Okay. Now, just regarding the research that you've done, Di, am I right in saying the research has focused on the development of athletes and what happens along that path and how it sort of influences the outcome? Is that fair to say that broadly what? Could you give us maybe, please, a brief summary about the sort of things you've looked into and maybe some key takeaways?
Yep. Well, one of the reasons that I sort of end up doing the research was that as part of my master's, I looked at the training loads and training intensities and injuries in relation to elite junior athletes between 13 and 17. And it was pretty staggering to see such a high percentage of kids with major injuries. And out of the 100 kids that I interviewed, 16% of them retired at the age of 17 because of injury. And that's really much, much higher than other sports. And you know, kids shouldn't be leaving a sport at that age because of injury. So then I thought, well, you know, let's look at this a little bit more. And there's a lot of research around why young athletes, talented young athletes, don't go on. So I thought, well, rather than looking at the negative, let's look at what the guys that did make it all the way through did. You know, what did the Australian athletes who went represented at the Olympics and the World Championships, where did they develop? So I looked at their backgrounds, you know, how much training they were doing, how many sports they were playing, what sort of parental support they had, how important their coaches were, and holistically at their development. And some key findings were that they were late specialisers. So although they loved track and field and they were good at track and field, and they knew that from a young age because at least half of them did little athletics, but they didn't do it to exclusion of other sports, and they didn't even specialise in their main event until their late teens. So they continued to play other sports, which is, the research shows, is really, really important in helping develop all-round skills, giving them confidence in their abilities and motivating them to continue. So that was one of the areas. But the other area was that they'd had good coaching all the way through, and good and parenting, or parents who were able to not just support them financially but also unconditionally, emotionally, and also the ability to transition as their child transitioned. So when they were doing little athletics or they started in the sport, the parents were the ones who introduced them to sport, encouraged family participation, encouraged them being involved in lots of sports, provided guidance, didn't interfere, weren't pushy. And then as they were older, the role changed. And again, as they moved into sort of post sort of late teens or late adolescence, getting into senior years, the parents took on a different role because the coaches were then becoming more important. But the quality of the coaching was really important. About a high percentage, 70% of their coaches had high qualifications, level 3 or 4 or above, tertiary education in a lot of cases. And the athletes and their families also were involved in ensuring that the coaching was the right coaching for the child or the developing athlete. If it wasn't right, then they helped them negotiate that. But largely, they had really good coaching experiences, and they had really good experiences, positive experiences in little athletics. It was fun. It was like sampling another sport for them. It wasn't their only sport, although I did have an example of one athlete who went on to multiple Olympics. So when he was about 8 years old, he had the light bulb moment when he watched the Olympics and said, that's what I want to do. And all those parents encouraged him to play other games and other sports, and they'd go to Little Athletics and you know, be playing games and doing fun-based things, which is what you do when you're 7, 8, 9 years old. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted to do serious training, and he wanted to do serious sprint training, and he didn't want to do any of that playing around. So, you know, parents and coaches have also got to understand sometimes you get kids like that and that's what they want to do, and you have to be able to support them and help them negotiate their way along that pathway. But in general, sampling lots of sports is the key to long-term success, and the research is is very, very strong in that area. And I think, you know, we're getting that message everywhere, not just through research. It's on every website for all the sports. So, you know, it's my research supported that for our sport, track and field.
Okay, well, if anyone does want to ask anything further about that, I do encourage people to put things in the chat box as we go along here. But people did actually ask some questions in advance of this session. They had the opportunity to do so. So we might go to some of them now, if that's okay. So, Di, when it comes to, a few people were really interested in motivation of athletes, and this may link into some of your research quite nicely, I suppose. So, did you have any sort of advice for coaches about motivating athletes?
Well, that's an interesting one because you know, I was looking at obviously athletes who had been gone to the highest level of the sport, and a lot of it's about, and people will know this, that you really need to have this intrinsic motivation because you're passionate and you love it. But in saying that, the coach and the athlete then needs to provide, the coach and the parents then need to provide the correct environment to allow that intrinsic motivation to keep them involved, keep them hungry. So you've got to provide that supportive, nurturing, welcoming environment, but you've also got to provide enough challenge for those kids, because a lot of these kids, they're very competitive. They want to win. They're enjoying the sport and they want to do well. So you've got to negotiate that balance between not pushing them and not making it too competitive, but also allowing them to develop new skills and learn and progress and see the progression. But I think the key to maintaining the motivation, which is there already naturally or intrinsically, is having the right environment, having the parents and having the coaches and the peers around them that will allow that motivation to develop in a positive way and continue, you know, their involvement in the sport. So I don't believe that you can make someone motivated. I think it's there. They love it, they want to do it. But having said that, there'll be times when they're not so motivated for reasons like they might be injured and they can't do what they normally do. So this is where, you know, the guidance of the parents and the coach can be really instrumental in helping them maintain that passion for the sport while they're going through a difficult period of time. And again, that's an area that all young athletes are going to have to deal with, setbacks and adversity, not just in sport, but everywhere else. So, you know, that again is part of creating that environment where athletes feel that they can approach you, being an approachable person, listening to them, all those sorts of characteristics are really important in helping with motivation ongoing.
Now, Di, I know in some of your research you looked into, as you said, injuries of developing athletes. There was some interest about obviously with your background as a distance running coach, appropriate distance running guidelines for junior athletes. Should there be minimum ages for events? Have we currently got it right, partly right, even completely wrong? I mean, what are your thoughts on that with guidelines for distance running for kids?
Well, I actually was involved in producing some sort of guidelines or for junior track and field athletes, and they're on the website, Athletics Australia's website. But in terms of it's all based on evidence and the general guidelines in terms of how much training people should be doing, how many sports they might be involved in, how much time, etc. That type of thing. But in terms of distance running, this is like an ongoing, and I have to say it's something that just keeps cycling around for at least 20 years that I've been involved in. It's something I'm really passionate about. I do not feel that young kids should be running in open 5K, 3K events, and I really believe the sport has got to put some guidelines in. Each individual state or the AA or the state bodies have got to, when they advertise these events, they have an open 3K event. Why have we got 10-year-old kids running in a open 3K event? There's enough competition and activities for kids of that age group, and I think the sport's got to do it, because if they set it up and they put the guidelines there, then the parents have got to follow that, and that's the way it is. So, internationally, there's a lot of general guidelines that say, looking across I looked across lots of other countries, America, Canada, Europe, England, Ireland, and those sort of general recommendations that in a fun run, like there's a difference between a 5K fun run where a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old or 10 or 11-year-old is jogging along with their parents, compared to running on the track round and round and round in that race. That's a different environment. And but even a 10K, like I think generally between 12 and 13, maybe they can do a 10K fun run, and then there are guidelines suggesting that 16's around 16 years for a half marathon and 18 years for a full marathon. So it is difficult to say, you cannot do this at such and such an age. So, the Kenyans, I spent a fair bit of time in Kenya, and, the kids do run around there for miles to school in bare feet. They do run 5, 10Ks to school and then go home at lunchtime and then go back to school and then come home again. So it's not that they can't do it. It's just the context that we put it in, I think.
Okay, I see Alice has put a question there in the chat box there, Di, about your views on the rep sport system, and also sport seasons crossing over, winter sports crossing over to summer and summer into winter, and all that type of thing, and maybe parents getting a little bit overexcited by the talent ID and and all these types of things. Any comments on that? Well,
again, it's a good question, and this is one of the issues that we have, that the kids are overloaded. Once they get into that age group, they're playing, sport at school, they're doing rep teams, they might be doing athletics, little athletics, and they might be going and doing senior athletics in the afternoon. And if you take just athletics, if they do that, it's all year, because the school, there's no break. And then in between that, on top of that, they've got other sports. So there is too much, and that is causing overload and overuse injuries, because that's one of the highest, sort of injuries that kids suffer from. Again, it's up to the parents to make sure, and this is what happened from my research. The parents were the ones who decided what the kids were doing at a younger age, even into their early adolescence. I remember one of the athletes who went to 2 or 3 Olympics, she said at age 13 or 14, her mum said, it's you got to choose horse riding or athletics. And she chose athletics. But sometimes the parents have just got to make the hard call, and it's not so easy for some parents to say no. So I guess it's an individual thing, but I think it does have to start with the parents.
It's an interesting thing, Di, isn't it? Because we are encouraging multi-sporting, aren't we, and pursuing a few different sports. But you're saying you can sort of go overboard, I suppose, can you?
Well, there's so many sports for the kids to choose from, and you know, it's difficult, and they want to have a go at everything. And sure, they should be involved in multi-sports, but I think what Alice is referring to is this crossover. There's so many of them. So, you know, the research and the medical advice is that kids need to have a break from competitive sport. They need, you know, a couple of months. And it's interesting in the American system, or in general, although it's getting worse now, is that they've always had the system where the kids just play the sports at school, and then they have the 2 months summer holiday, and they just don't do any sport. I mean, you know, they do have opportunities to be in rep sports and things now, but in general, that system where the kids just play sport at school and then in the summer holidays they have a big break, and you know, some families still do that now, which is fantastic, and the kids are getting a rest, but we do have this issue, and I don't know what the answer is to that.
There are a couple of other things that people were interested in. If you had any advice regarding goal setting, and we might have touched a little bit on that, but goal setting and also performance monitoring.
Goal setting is an interesting one. So particularly with younger athletes, I think it's difficult for young people to actually understand goal setting, and we may need to reframe it and just have little aims that they might want, rather than, you know, big goal setting that you might be going to do when you're a bit older. And I think it's just looking for small achievable goals. So, you know, a lot of kids will come to you and say, you know, I want to go to the Olympics. Well, obviously, of course they do, but you know, that's not a realistic goal at that stage. So setting some progressive steps along the way is probably a better approach with kids. And as they get older and they get more involved in the sport, sure, you're going to have goals for the season, and you know, you sit down with your coach and you realistically work those, because at that stage, when you're talking about kids in, you know, at high school, starting high school, they've got an idea what setting a realistic aim means. They've got an idea about what they need to do, the steps towards doing it, what they might need to not do, like they might have to, you know, give up a sport or give up some other activities to have the time. So they actually understand what they've got to do to achieve that goal. When they're younger, I don't think it's something that they can do. So again, you know, the coach or the parents are helping them with that goal. As they get older, it's something that the coach and the athlete are doing together. It's a mutual goal, and they're working towards it together. In terms of performance, just progress or work, looking at how their performance is going and mapping that, there's a lot of science around that now, particularly in relation to the you know, the maturation process and looking at when kids reach their you know, their peak height velocity and looking at that in terms of loading them up. So that's quite scientific, and it's all very well if you've got access to people who can keep those recordings. But I think in track and field, it's a lot of it's to do, I think, with listening to the kids. If they're, for example, they've got, you know, the typical growth issues, they've got sore calves, Achilles, they've got sore knees because they're, you know, getting a bit of osgood. I think it's just listening to them and monitoring that and resting when appropriate, getting some physio or some medical advice, those sorts of things. But in terms of performance sort of monitoring, I don't know that at the younger ages that's something that needs to have the scientific approach. It's more a practical, and parents being aware and being involved, understanding a little bit about what's happening, and being involved, you know, and being the person that is making the decisions.
Okay, and I just remind everybody if they'd like to put a question in the chat box, please do so. Di, you mentioned that the quality of coaching is an important thing that you've found through your research and for developing athletes. And obviously, besides, I suppose, continuing to gain higher accreditation, and if that's what people want to do, where would you point coaches of young athletes to learn more, to develop as coaches?
Well, I think one of the key areas for me, and one of the ways that I've learned so much, is by forming collaboration or networks with other coaches, finding a mentor, finding someone that you really admire the way they coach or the type of person they are, and connecting with them. And so, look, I've had some fantastic mentors, and still have, for example, John, John Quinn, who I started out with back in the late 90s, and we're still now back working together here in Sydney, and he's gone out of track and field, gone into AFL, and then come back into track and field. So I think somebody was talking about Simon, the cross-fertilisation of other sports and coaches. So working with someone like that is really good. Dick Telford's another person that I've had a long relationship, and other coaches have talked to me in my research about the importance of team coaching, like bringing your squads together and sharing your knowledge collectively as coaches, learning off each other, and then the athletes benefit too, because they're getting input from other coaches. And I think that the mentoring, I think a formal mentoring system, a lot of people have talked about it, is really one of the number one things that we could do to help young coaches or new coaches into the sport, because the coach accreditation systems are a really good starting point, and the research also talks about that in terms of coaches who are really experienced. They've looked at how they've developed, and it's always been the same sort of pattern. It's been your accreditation, getting your accreditation, that's your foundation, supplementing it with other education, doing courses, going to seminars, workshops, taking a course in some psychology, or doing a master's in some sort of coaching, and then having that network of other coaches that you are part of, learning from, asking questions. And you can do that so easily now, because we can just send messages. And I've just recently made a connection with a rugby coach in England through some of the teaching that I'm doing, and we've sort of been having chats together and exchanging ideas and things. So I think it's a lifelong learning experience, and the message to young and sort of starting out coaches: don't be afraid to connect with someone, because coaches love to talk about coaching, and they love to share their knowledge, and they love to see other coaches developing too. So I would love to see more and more of that. You go to the track and you see 3 different coaches groups out on the track, and they're all doing the same events, but there's no collaboration between any of them. They all go to their own corners of the track, and I think we need to change that, and we need to work together in a team.
And I mean, does that even involve, do you think, bringing squads together to train under?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a squad. When part of my research, I interviewed 12 of our sort of most accomplished coaches in Australia, who between them had coached 200 Olympic athletes, and world juniors, right through, and they work there's 3 of them. They work together with their squads once a week. And one of them's 2 of them are, really experienced coaches in their late 60s, even 70s, been coaching for 50 odd years. Another one's like in their maybe 30s, 40s, an ex-athlete, and is doing really well with his group, and they come together and they said it's not just on the track. They meet before the session at a coffee place, and they sit down and they talk not just about athletics. And some of the benefits they've seen is not just for the coaches but also the athletes. Helping each other. So you might get some athletes who are the older athletes, and this is something that came really strongly through my research, that the structure, the training group's so important, and the coach is really instrumental in getting that good training group and using the older role models, or using the older athletes as role models, and often they're a conduit to the coach, because sometimes the younger athletes might talk to the older athletes about a problem or an issue that they not feel confident to talk to the coach, and then that way the coach does get to know it. So using your training squads and the people in it, working out who the leaders are, working out the ones who are the nurturers, the carers, that sort of thing really helps you as a coach in terms of, you know, looking after all of your athletes and you learning as well.
You know, a question it reminded me did come in, Di, regarding size of training groups. I don't know whether you have any thoughts about this, or any of your research has shown out, but there was just a question whether, you know, a smaller training group or a larger training group might assist an athlete. You know, give an example. Do you keep it, you know, sizes of 4 to 6, or is it better to have, you know, up to 20 athletes? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. I think that I think if the squad gets too large, I think you lose that ability to really look after the individual. And I remember when I was, or maybe I had in the early days in coaching in Hobart, I probably wouldn't have had more than ever 12 or 15 in a group, but I'd sometimes remember when I got home, now, did I actually say something personally to each of them tonight? Did I actually say, well done on your session, or is there something that you looked a bit tired? Is there something that's not right, or you want to talk about something? And so I think you lose that ability with too big a squad. You lose the ability to really connect with them, and that can be a reason why an athlete, you know, might leave or feel that they're not being treated as the same as the others. So and then if you have got a big group, then what you've got to try and do is start to get in some people that might help you. So you might encourage, if it's a group of younger athletes, you might encourage a parent who'd be really keen to be involved, or you get some older athletes who might come in that you might have coached in the past and then moved on, and you can use them to help you. So I think it's logistically it gets harder with more athletes, but also I think on the emotional connection side of personal side, it's harder too. That's my personal opinion for me, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Now, Di, you've actually, you know, crossed paths with so many athletes, whether it be through your own coaching, your team managing at a high performance level, at major events, and through your research. Is there any common traits amongst them, or are they all different, or can you see a common thread that runs through the people that sort of really do make it to the top?
Well, I think that the common theme is, not surprisingly, is that they love what they do. You know, they're passionate about what they do. They are definitely goal oriented. They're very determined. They're very committed. You know, prepared to make. I don't like using the word make sacrifices, because I think they choose to do what they're doing, so it isn't a sacrifice. But it was interesting that also one of the coaches I interviewed said that, you know, you can tell they've got that natural desire to win. You know, they're very naturally competitive, and they're the ones that he sort of used an analogy that if you had to go to war, they're the ones who jump over the fence and say, yeah, I'm with you. You know, they're just that sort of person. And but having said that, they might all have those traits of being determined and goal oriented, motivated and whatever, but as individuals, they're all very different. And the interesting thing too is it doesn't matter if you're coaching a young child, you know, 10, 11, or you're coaching an elite athlete who's you know, going to be running at the Olympics. That they're all the same. They want you to care about them. They want you to know them as a person, and that's no different. I don't think it's any different whether they're elite or they're just a kid starting out, or they're just competing in their school carnival and they have no other aspirations than just competing in their school carnival. It's all the same in terms of you know, how you need, or how I would respond and how I treat the athletes.
How do you, sort of a question's just come through on the chat box there, Di, about, and I suppose if I interpret this, getting athletes through performance drops, whether it be through changes in their bodies or whether it be, you know, you got any sort of thoughts about that? About, again, we spoke about motivation, but any thoughts about that at all?
Yeah, that's a really common, particularly I think the questions relating to girls going through puberty. I think I got some good tips on that. I mean, I have some you know, of my own experience, but I think one of the things that can be useful is changing their focus to a different event if you can. Not you know, if they're a runner, not changing them to a thrower, but maybe if they're a sprinter, moving them up, or if they're a middle distance, moving them down a little bit, so that at least they've got a new starting level and they can get some, you know, personal best or whatever. But you know, it is difficult because girls do plateau at that stage. And the other thing that can happen too in the distance athletes is not that they plateau, is that they start to run faster because they decide, well, if I don't have as much weight, then I'm going to run faster, and they do run faster. So that's a big issue with girls, and particularly distance runners, that as coaches we need to be very, very aware of and proactive in dealing with those sort of athletes. But I think changing, giving them a change of focus, having a really good, again, the training group, and making it social, starting, especially in that age group, you know, having some social activities together, so that they may not be performing as well as they had in the past, but they've got that connection with their group and they're supportive and they're understanding as well, because that's, again, that my research showed that their peers in that late adolescence, mid to later adolescence, was really, really important in their motivation and just wanting to come to training and being part of it. So I think, you know, again, the training group can be really instrumental in keeping them through, getting them through.
I'm going to take one more question through the chat box before we start rounding off there. Di, you can see from Simon there, has just asked, look, the issue of multiple coaches. How do you suggest handling issues where there's one coach who thinks maybe their discipline is the most important, or the coaches don't get on, maybe, which could be an issue, I suppose. If athletes are using various specialist coaches in different disciplines, any thoughts there?
Well, that's a really interesting one, and we use that, Simon, that case in the Masters of High Performance Coaching or High Performance Sport at UTS that I've been teaching, that this is an issue that coaches have to face or have to be aware of, that they often work in multidisciplinary teams, and it's difficult. It's all about communication, but there's also big egos involved. So in some cases, the athlete, if the athlete's older, needs to take a fair bit of ownership in deciding that. But, you know, a lot of us are talking about younger athletes here. You know, the poll showed that people are coaching in the younger athletes. And look, it has to come down to the parents again. It's they need to be orchestrating and organising their children's activities, and if coaches are there are too many coaches and they're causing stress to the kids, then the parents have got to take the matter in hand. And but as I said, it's a totally different thing as the athletes get older, because the parents are not as instrumental or important in that area. They're surely important in lots of other areas, but it's something that the coaches have got to be mature about, and the coaches have got to understand that if there's a couple of sports or a couple of disciplines going on, that you've all got to work together to the benefit of the athlete. And so it's a difficult one. Sorry, Simon, I can't really give you a definitive answer, but I know Marina has to do a good juggling act there with the coaches she has.
Thanks for all your questions there, everybody. That's been fantastic. Di, just finally, what's coming up next for you in coaching or research or teaching? I mean, what's on the horizon for you?
Well, I've just as I said, I've been working, helping out again with John Quinn and his group, and he's got a really interesting group of athletes and sprinters, from sort of say 15 through to a masters athlete. So I'm really enjoying being part of that group. I'm really enjoying just assisting and doing what I can, but I don't want to be too involved, and I'm not thinking of taking on or developing another squad of my own, because I'm busy working, and I'm also coming to the stage in my life where I'm not sure where I might finish up living, because we could end up back home and back in Victoria, and I'm pretty sure I would get back into developing my own squad. But for the time being, I'm really enjoying and working with developing students, and some of who will become coaches. And I think if I lecture 25 students, then they're going to go out and have their own squads, and so I guess I'm spreading my knowledge and experience that way. So that's sort of what's on the horizon for me. Yeah.
Thanks, Di. It has been absolutely wonderful on Sunday Coaching School. So we really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate some of the great wisdom that you've passed on to us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to, if anybody wants to contact me via email about anything in the future, I'm more than open to or happy to answer any questions or whatever, or send any information through to people.
Thanks for that, Di.